I was folding laundry in my living room on a Sunday afternoon when my son Marcus called, and the moment I heard his voice, I knew something was different. There was this cold, formal tone that I'd never heard before, like he was calling a business associate instead of his mother, like he was reading from a script he'd practiced. "Mom, we need to talk," he said, and my hands stopped mid-fold, holding one of the dish towels I'd been putting away. The same dish towels I'd bought for his first apartment when he moved out for college all those years ago. "Okay, baby, what's going on?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm, even though my heart had started beating faster. That mother's intuition telling me something was wrong before my mind could catch up. "I'm calling to let you know that Brittany and I have decided we don't need your help anymore. We're adults, we can handle our own lives, and we think it's time we establish some boundaries." The words hit me like a physical blow, each one landing with precision, like tiny daggers carefully aimed at my heart. "What do you mean you don't need my help anymore? Marcus, I'm your mother. What brought this on? Did something happen? Did I do something wrong?" And he sighed, that impatient sigh I'd heard so many times from teenagers, but never from my 32-year-old son. Never from the boy I'd raised to be respectful and thoughtful. "Mom, you're too involved. You call too much. You offer advice we didn't ask for. You show up unannounced. Brittany thinks, and I agree, that we need space to build our marriage without constant interference from family. I'm so glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like and subscribe to my channel and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my story from. I want to know how far it's traveled. Because what started as my son telling me he didn't need me anymore turned into a situation where his wife made a catastrophic mistake, and suddenly I was the only one who could save them. But by then, the damage to our relationship had been done, and I had to decide whether being right was more important than being there for my child, whether my hurt feelings mattered more than his desperate need for help. My name is Gloria. I'm 56 years old, and until that phone call, I thought I had a good relationship with my son. I'd raised Marcus by myself after his father walked out when he was 3 years old, just packed a bag one Tuesday morning while Marcus was at daycare, and left a note saying he couldn't handle the responsibility of being a father, that he needed to find himself, that he was sorry but he had to go. Those were hard years that followed, some of the hardest of my life, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat, working as a nurse at county hospital during the day and picking up shifts at an urgent care clinic on weekends. I missed his school events because I was at work, missed parent-teacher conferences because I couldn't get the time off, ate ramen and beans for weeks so Marcus could have decent meals with protein and vegetables. I wore the same 3 work uniforms for years, patched and mended so Marcus could have new school clothes each year. I drove a car that barely ran, praying it would start each morning so Marcus could take piano lessons. I sacrificed everything, and I never regretted it, never once, because he was my son, my whole world, the reason I got up every morning and kept pushing forward. But we'd made it through, somehow. We'd survived the poverty, the struggle, the nights when I'd cried in the shower because I didn't know how I'd make rent. And Marcus had grown into a successful man, had overcome every obstacle, had proven that a single mother could raise a son to be good and kind and accomplished. He was a senior accountant at a prestigious firm downtown, Harrison and Associates, had bought a beautiful house in the suburbs with a 2-car garage and a backyard, and 2 years ago, he'd married Brittany, a woman I'd tried so hard to accept despite my reservations, despite the little voice in my head that said something wasn't quite right about her. Brittany came from money, the kind of old money that most people only see in movies. Her family had vacation homes in Martha's Vineyard and Aspen, had country club memberships going back generations, had attended the same prestigious universities for decades. Her parents, Richard and Patricia Montgomery, looked down on me from the moment we met at the engagement party Brittany's family threw at their massive estate. I'd worn my best dress, had gotten my hair done, had practiced conversations in my head, but nothing prepared me for the way Patricia's eyes swept over me, taking in my off-the-rack dress, my modest jewelry, my work-worn hands, and dismissed me as beneath their notice. Richard had asked me what I did for a living, and when I said I was a nurse, he'd made this little sound, not quite a laugh, but close, and said, "Oh, how practical," in a tone that made it clear he thought nursing was barely a step above cleaning toilets. And Brittany, while never overtly rude, while always maintaining a veneer of politeness, had this way of making me feel like I was intruding whenever I visited, like I was a guest who'd overstayed their welcome. She'd smile that tight smile, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and say things like, "Oh, Gloria, you didn't have to come all this way," even though all this way was 20 minutes from my house to theirs. Or she'd say, "We were just about to have some private time," even when I'd called ahead to confirm the visit was okay, even when Marcus had specifically said they'd love to see me. There were 1,000 little cuts, little moments of exclusion, little comments that individually seemed innocent, but together painted a picture of someone who viewed me as an obstacle to be managed, rather than family to be embraced. But I'd bitten my tongue, reminded myself that this was Marcus's choice, that he loved her, that I needed to respect his marriage, even if I felt increasingly shut out. I'd tried to be the perfect mother-in-law, offering help without being pushy, bringing meals I'd cooked on my days off without criticism, babysitting their dog Winston when they traveled without complaint. I'd complimented Brittany's decorating choices, even when I thought the house was too cold and modern. I'd listened to her talk about her job in marketing without pointing out that my job saving lives was arguably more important. I'd smiled and nodded when she corrected my grammar or my table manners, or the way I'd arranged flowers I'd brought. I'd swallowed my pride and my hurt feelings because I thought that's what good mothers-in-law did. That's what keeping the peace looked like. But apparently, that wasn't enough. Apparently, according to this phone call that was shattering my Sunday afternoon peace, I was too involved and needed to establish boundaries, needed to back off, needed to essentially disappear from my son's life unless he specifically requested my presence. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, even as my hands started shaking, "can we talk about this in person? I don't understand what I've done wrong. If I've overstepped, if I've made Brittany uncomfortable, I want to know so I can fix it. But please, let's not do this over the phone. Let's sit down and talk like family." And he said, in that same cold voice that didn't sound like my son's son at all, "That's exactly the problem, Mom. You don't see it. You think you're being helpful, but you're being controlling. Brittany's then very patient. She's tried to hint, she's tried to gently establish boundaries, but you don't take the hints. So I'm asking you, as your son, to give us space. Don't call unless we call first, don't visit unless you're invited, and don't offer advice unless we ask for it. We need to build our marriage without you hovering over us constantly." I felt tears burning in my eyes, felt my throat tightening with emotion, but I forced them back because I didn't want him to hear me cry, didn't want to give him the satisfaction of knowing how deeply his words were cutting. "So you're saying I need your permission to talk to my own son? I need an invitation to see you? I'm supposed to wait by the phone hoping you'll call?" "I'm saying we need boundaries, Mom, healthy boundaries. This is what therapists recommend for adult children and their parents. Surely you can understand that. You're a nurse. You understand the importance of healthy relationships." But I couldn't understand it, not really, because in my family, in my culture, in the community I've grown up in, you didn't shut out your mother. You didn't tell her she needed permission to call. You didn't treat her like an inconvenience or a burden. Family was everything. Family was the foundation. Family was who you turned to when times got hard. And I told him that, tried to explain that, This felt like rejection, like punishment for caring too much, like he was choosing his wife's comfort over his mother's heart. I knew you wouldn't understand, Marcus said, and there was something in his voice now, something that sounded rehearsed, like these were words Brittany had fed him. That's why Brittany said we should just make a clean break for a while. Not forever, Mom. Just for a while. Until we establish our independence, until we figure out who we are as a couple without family interference. A clean break? My voice was rising now, the tears starting to fall despite my best efforts to hold them back. Marcus, I'm your mother. You can't just cut me off like I'm some ex-girlfriend who won't take a hint. What about Sunday dinners? We've had Sunday dinner together almost every week for your entire life, except when you were away at college. What about our phone calls? We talk almost every day. What about birthdays and holidays? What about we'll reach out when? We're ready, Mom. We'll let you know when we're comfortable having you back in our lives. But right now, we need space. I have to go. Brittany and I have plans. And he hung up. Just like that. After 32 years of being the center of each other's world. After everything I'd sacrificed and given and done. After raising him alone and working myself to exhaustion and going without so he could have everything he needed, my son had dismissed me with a cold phone call and a click. I sat there in my living room, surrounded by half-folded laundry, piles of towels and sheets that suddenly seemed pointless, because who was I folding them for? Who was I maintaining this house for, if not for the family that apparently didn't want me anymore? And I cried. I cried like I hadn't cried since Marcus's father left, deep, wrenching sobs that shook my whole body. I cried for the little boy who used to climb into my bed during thunderstorms, who'd wrap his small arms around my neck and whisper, "You're the best mommy in the whole world." I cried for the teenager who told me I was his hero after I worked a double shift and still made it to his basketball championship game, sitting in the bleachers in my scrubs because I hadn't had time to change. I cried for the young man who'd thanked me through tears at his college graduation, saying none of it would have been possible without me, that every success he'd ever have would be because of my sacrifices. And I cried for myself, for the mother who'd given everything, who'd put her own life on hold, who'd never remarried or even dated seriously because she didn't want to bring men in and out of her son's life, who'd worked herself to exhaustion, who'd gone without vacations and new clothes and any luxuries so her son could have opportunities. And I cried for the woman who was now being told that all that love and sacrifice and dedication was too much, was interference, was something to be managed and controlled and shut out. My best friend Denise came over that evening after I called her, barely able to speak through my tears, just saying, "I need you," and she understood. She let herself in with the key I'd given her years ago, found me still sitting in the same spot on the couch, surrounded by laundry I'd never finished folding, mascara streaked down my face. She didn't say anything at first, just sat down next to me and held me while I sobbed, rubbing my back the way she'd done so many times over the years, through breakups and job stresses and the death of my mother. She made me tea, the chamomile tea she knew I liked, and listened to the whole story, every painful detail, every word Marcus had said, every feeling of rejection and hurt and confusion I was experiencing. And when I finished, when I'd exhausted myself with crying and talking, she was quiet for a long moment before saying, "Gloria, I'm going to tell you something you don't want to hear, but you need to hear it. And I want you to know I'm saying this because I love you, because I've been your friend for 30 years, and because someone needs to be honest with you right now. Marcus is a grown man with a wife, and while the way he handled this was harsh, maybe even cruel, there might be some truth in what he said." I pulled back from her, hurt and betrayed. "You're taking his side? You're saying I deserve this?" I'm not taking anyone's side, Denise said gently, taking my hands in hers. And you absolutely don't deserve to be hurt like this. But Gloria, honey, you do call him a lot. I've been here when you call him 3 times in one evening. You do show up at his house pretty frequently, even when you haven't been specifically invited. You do give a lot of unsolicited advice, especially about Brittany and how they should run their household. I've heard you do it, I've watched you do it, and I've wanted to say something for a while now but didn't want to hurt your feelings. I wanted to argue, wanted to defend myself, wanted to explain that everything I did was out of love, that a mother worrying about her son wasn't being controlling, it was being caring. But part of me, the honest part that I usually tried to ignore, knew Denise was right. I did call Marcus almost every day, sometimes multiple times. I did drive by his house on my way home from work, which was 15 minutes out of my way, often stopping in just for a minute that somehow turned into an hour or more. I did offer opinions on everything, from how they should landscape their yard, to what color they should paint the kitchen, to how Brittany should handle conflicts with her boss, to what they should be saving for retirement. I did make comments about Brittany, little observations about her cooking or her housekeeping or the way she talked to Marcus, comments that I framed as helpful, but that probably came across as critical. But I'm his mother, I said weakly, hearing how pathetic it sounded even as I said it. That's my job, to care about him, to want to help him, to be involved in his life. Your job, Denise said, and her voice was gentle but firm, was to raise him to be independent. And you did. Gloria, you raised an incredible man. You raised someone who's successful and kind and capable. But now you need to let him be that man. You need to let him make his own choices, even his own mistakes, without constantly being there to guide him or protect him. That's not helping him. That's holding him back. So you think I should just accept this? I asked. Just let him cut me off without fighting back? I think, Denise said carefully, that you should respect his request for space. Not forever, but for now. I think you should use this time to think about what your relationship with Marcus should look like now that he's a married adult, not the little boy who needed you for everything. And I think you should work on building your own life, your own interests, your own identity beyond being Marcus's mother. I knew she was right, even though it hurt to hear it. I knew that somewhere along the way, I'd made Marcus my entire world, had made being his mother my entire identity. When people asked about me, I talked about Marcus. When I had free time, I spent it thinking about Marcus, or trying to see Marcus, or helping Marcus with something. I'd been so focused on being the best mother possible that I'd forgotten to be a complete person, had forgotten that I was Gloria, not just Marcus's mom. I spent the next few weeks in a fog of grief and anger and confusion, cycling through all the stages of loss. Denial came first, convincing myself that Marcus would call any day, that he'd realize he'd made a mistake, that he'd apologize, and everything would go back to normal. I kept my phone on high volume, jumped every time it rang, checked it obsessively for missed calls or texts. But Marcus didn't call, didn't text, didn't reach out at all. Then came anger, hot and burning. How dare he treat me this way after everything I'd done for him? How dare he choose that woman over the mother who'd sacrificed everything? I ranted to Denise, to my coworkers, to anyone who would listen, painting Marcus as ungrateful and Brittany as manipulative. I imagined confrontations where I told them exactly what I thought. Imagined Marcus crying and begging for forgiveness. Imagined Brittany revealed as the villain she clearly was. Bargaining came next, that desperate phase, where I found myself making deals with God, with the universe, with anyone who might be listening. If Marcus calls today, I'll never drop by unannounced again. If he reaches out this week, I'll only call once a week like he asked. I'll be the perfect mother-in-law. I'll never criticize Brittany. I'll respect every boundary. Just please let my son come back to me. Depression settled in around week 3, a heavy blanket of sadness that made it hard to get out of bed, hard to go to work, hard to do anything but think about how I'd lost my son, how my life had no purpose anymore. I stopped cooking real meals, just ate whatever was easy. I stopped exercising, stopped seeing friends, stopped doing the things I normally enjoyed. What was the point of any of it if Marcus wasn't in my life? And finally, slowly, acceptance began to creep in. Not acceptance that our relationship was over forever, but acceptance that it needed to change, that I needed to change. Denise had been gently pushing me toward this realization, suggesting a therapist she knew who specialized in family dynamics. I'd resisted at first, thinking therapy was for people with real problems, not for mothers who loved their sons too much. But finally, in week 4 of the silence, I made an appointment. Dr. Patricia Williams was a Black woman in her 60s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude that reminded me a bit of my own mother. In our first session, I told her everything, expecting sympathy, expecting her to tell me Marcus was wrong and I was the victim. Instead, she listened carefully and then said, "Gloria, I want you to do something for me. I want you to imagine Marcus sitting in that chair right there. Now tell me, honestly, what percentage of your identity is wrapped up in being his mother?" I thought about it, really thought about it. I don't know, maybe 70%? Dr. Williams nodded. And what's the other 30%? I struggled to answer. My job, I guessed. My friendship with Denise. But even as I said it, I talked about Marcus at work. That even my friendship with Denise centered largely around my relationship with my son. "That's the problem," Dr. Williams said gently. "You've made Marcus responsible for your entire sense of self-worth, and that's not fair to him, and it's not healthy for you." Over the following weeks, Dr. Williams helped me understand patterns I'd developed, patterns that had started innocently enough, but had become unhealthy. She helped me see that after Marcus's father left, I'd poured all my need for love and connection into my son, had made him fill the roles of son, best friend, companion, purpose in life. She helped me see that when Marcus went to college, I'd struggled with empty nest syndrome, but had coped by staying overly involved in his life. And when he got married, I'd seen Brittany not as a partner for my son, but as a competitor for his attention and love. "But I did it all out of love," I protested. "Everything I did was because I love him." "I believe that," Dr. Williams said. "But Gloria, love without boundaries isn't healthy love. It's enmeshment. And enmeshment feels like love, but it's actually about needing your needs, not his. When you call Marcus 3 times a day, is that about his need to hear from you, or your need to know he's okay? When you show up unannounced, is that about his need to see you, or your need to feel included in his life? When you give advice he didn't ask for, is that about helping him, or about feeling needed and important? These questions stung, but they also rang true. I started journaling, which Dr. Williams suggested, writing down every time I thought about calling Marcus, every time I wanted to drive by his house, every time I wanted to offer advice or help. And I started to see the pattern. Most of the time, these urges weren't about Marcus's needs at all. They were about managing my own anxiety, my own fear of being forgotten or replaced, my own need to feel important and valued. Dr. Williams gave me homework. She told me to make a list of interests I'd had before Marcus was born, hobbies I'd enjoyed, dreams I'd had for myself. At first, I couldn't think of anything. My entire adult life had been about being a mother, about survival and sacrifice. But then, slowly, memories started surfacing. I'd loved to garden before time and money got so tight. I'd enjoyed reading, especially mysteries and historical fiction. I'd taken a pottery class once and had loved the feel of clay in my hands. I'd always wanted to travel, to see places beyond the 20-mile radius of my home and work. So I started small. I picked up extra shifts at the hospital, not because I needed the money, but because I needed something to fill the hours I would have spent with Marcus. I spent more time with Denise and my other friends, really engaging with them, instead of just talking about my son. I started a small garden. In my backyard, nothing fancy, just some tomatoes and herbs and flowers. I joined a book club at the library. I took a watercolor painting class at the community college. I did all the things people tell you to do when you're trying to fill a hole in your life, trying to find yourself again after losing a central part of your identity. But nothing really helped, not completely, because the hole wasn't shaped like a hobby or a friendship or a new interest. It was shaped like my son, shaped like the relationship we'd had, and nothing else would fit into that space. I'd lie awake at night, wondering what Marcus was doing, whether he thought about me, whether he missed me at all. I'd see things that reminded me of him, his favorite foods at the grocery store, a song he used to love on the radio, and I'd feel that sharp pang of loss all over again. 6 weeks passed. 6 long, painful weeks of silence. No calls, no texts, no contact at all. I saw on social media, because I couldn't help myself from checking even though Dr. Williams said I should probably unfollow Marcus for a while, that he and Brittany had gone on vacation to the Bahamas. I saw photos of them at restaurants, at the beach, at what looked like a couple's spa day, living their life without me. Each photo felt like another small cut, another reminder that I wasn't wanted, wasn't needed, wasn't part of his world anymore. They looked happy, genuinely happy, and I hated myself for resenting that, for wanting them to be miserable without me, when I should have wanted my son to be happy. I noticed in the photos that Brittany was wearing new jewelry, expensive-looking pieces I was sure Marcus had bought her. I noticed they were staying at a 5-star resort, the kind of place that costs thousands of dollars a night. And I couldn't help but think about how hard I'd worked to put Marcus through college, how I'd taken out loans I was still paying off, how I'd given him everything I had. And now he was spending money on luxury vacations with a woman who'd convinced him to cut his mother out of his life. The bitterness I'd been trying to work through in therapy came flooding back, along with a fresh wave of hurt. Then, on a Tuesday evening, my phone rang. It was late, around 10 p.m., late for a call. And when I saw Marcus's name on the screen, my heart leaped. For a split second, I considered not answering, considered letting him feel what it was like to reach out and be ignored. But I couldn't do it. I'd waited 6 weeks for this call, and I answered before the second ring. Marcus? Mom? His voice was different again, but not cold this time, strained, worried, scared even. And I immediately went into mother mode, all my hurt feelings temporarily suspended by concern. Mom, I need your help. I know I said we needed space. I know I haven't called, but Mom, I really need your help right now. Those words. After 6 weeks of silence, after being told he didn't need me, didn't want my involvement, that I was too much and too controlling and needed to back off, now he needed my help. And I'll be honest, my first instinct was to say, I thought you didn't need me. I thought you wanted space. I thought you could handle your own life without interference. The petty part of me, the hurt part that was still angry and grieving, wanted to throw his words back at him, wanted him to feel even a fraction of the pain he'd caused me. But I didn't say any of that, because he was my son, and mothers don't turn their backs on their children, even when their children have hurt them. That's what I'd learned in my 56 years, what my own mother had modeled for me, what seemed to be written into my DNA. When your child calls and says they need you, you don't hesitate, you don't keep score, you don't make them beg. You just show up. "What's wrong, baby?" I asked, reverting to the nickname I'd used since he was little, the one I hadn't used in years because he'd outgrown it. "Tell me what's going on." "It's Brittany," and his voice broke, actual tears in it. "Mom, she's been arrested. The police arrested her tonight. She's at the station right now, and they won't let me see her, and I don't know what to do. I'm so scared, Mom. I need you." The words tumbled out of him in a rush, panic making them run together. She got pulled over for speeding. She was coming home from a work event, and the cops said they smelled drugs. They searched her car, and they found cocaine. Mom, they found a lot of cocaine, like a kilo. They're saying she was dealing drugs. They've charged her with possession with intent to distribute. She could go to prison for years. Mom, we need help. I need help. I don't know what to do, and you're the only person I could think to call. My mind was racing, trying to process this information, trying to make sense of it. Brittany? Arrested for drug possession? Intent to distribute? It seemed impossible, absurd even. Whatever my personal issues with her, whatever resentment I felt about how she'd treated me, I'd never thought she was involved in anything illegal. She was uptight, rigid, controlling, yes. But a drug dealer? It didn't fit with anything I knew about her. "Where are you right now?" I asked, already standing up, already looking around for my purse and keys, my nurse training kicking in, that ability to stay calm in a crisis. "At the police station on Miller Road, the 3rd precinct. Mom, they won't let me see her. They said she's being processed and I can't go back there. I'm just sitting here in this waiting room and I don't know what to do. What if she has to stay in jail? What if she goes to prison? This will ruin everything, Mom. Her career, our reputation, our whole life. Everyone we know will find out. Her parents are going to lose their minds. What do I do?" "Listen to me, Marcus," I said, grabbing my purse, finding my keys. "I'm coming. I'm leaving right now. It's going to take me about 20 minutes to get there. While you're waiting for me, I need you to not talk to anyone without a lawyer present. Don't make any statements. Don't sign anything. Don't try to explain the situation to the police. Just wait. Can you do that?" "Yes, Mom. Yes, okay. Thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm sorry about everything. I'm sorry I cut you off. I'm sorry I said those things. I just need you right now. Please hurry." I drove to the police station faster than I probably should have, my mind spinning with questions and scenarios. How had this happened? Was Brittany really involved with drugs? Or was this some kind of mistake, some kind of setup? And underneath all those practical questions, one I was ashamed of but couldn't quite suppress: karma. Brittany had worked so hard to push me out of Marcus's life, and now she'd made a catastrophic mistake that brought me right back in. Now she needed me, or at least Marcus needed me, because of her. And I hated myself a little bit for feeling that tiny spark of grim satisfaction. When I got to the police station, Marcus was pacing in the lobby, looking more disheveled and panicked than I'd ever seen him in his life. His shirt was untucked, his hair was messy, his eyes were red and swollen from crying. When he saw me, he rushed over, and I thought for a moment he might hug me, but he stopped short, uncertain. That 6 weeks of distance still between us like a physical wall. "Thanks for coming, Mom," he said. And there was genuine gratitude in his voice, but also shame, also the knowledge that he'd rejected me and now needed me. "Of course I came," I said, keeping my voice neutral, even though part of me wanting to make him acknowledge what he'd done, wanting to hear him really apologize before I helped. But this wasn't the time. Tell me everything you know. Start from the beginning. Marcus explained, his words spilling out in a jumbled rush. Brittany had been at a networking event for her marketing firm, some cocktail party at a downtown hotel. She'd had a few drinks, not enough to be impaired, but enough that she might not have been at her best judgment. She'd left around 9:30 to drive home. About 10 minutes from their house, she'd been pulled over for going 55 in a 35-mile-per-hour zone. Routine traffic stop, nothing dramatic. The officer had approached her car, asked for license and registration. But then, Marcus said, the officer claimed he smelled marijuana. He asked Brittany if she had anything illegal in the car. Brittany, nervous and flustered, and not thinking clearly, said no, of course not. The officer asked if he could search the vehicle, and Brittany, not understanding her rights, not realizing she could refuse, had consented. In the trunk, tucked under the spare tire in a black plastic bag, they found a kilo brick of cocaine, sealed, professionally packaged, street value of around $30,000. Brittany was insisting she had no idea how it got there, that she'd never seen it before, that someone must have put it in her car without her knowledge. But the police weren't buying it. Possession is 9/10 of the law, they said. It was in her car, in her trunk, and she had no explanation for how it got there. They'd arrested her on the spot, read her Miranda rights, taken her to the station. She was being processed now, fingerprinted, photographed, the whole humiliating ordeal. Do you believe her? I asked Marcus directly, watching his face carefully. Do you believe she didn't know about the drugs? He looked at me, and I saw doubt flicker across his features. Not doubt about his wife's innocence exactly, but doubt about his own judgment, doubt about whether he really knew the woman he'd married. I want to believe her, Mom. I mean, of course I believe her. Brittany's not a drug user. She barely even drinks. She's never done anything illegal in her life, as far as I know. But Mom, a kilo? That's not personal use. That's not a little baggie. Someone dropped in her car as a prank. That's serious weight. That's distribution quantity. And it was in her car, in her trunk. How do I explain that? How do I make sense of it? We sat down in the hard plastic chairs of the police station lobby, the kind that are designed to be uncomfortable, to make people not want to stay. I took Marcus's hand, and he let me, and for a moment it was like the 6 weeks of silence had never happened, like he was my boy again, and I was his mother, and that was all that mattered. Let's think about this logically, I said, falling back on my nursing training, the problem-solving approach they'd taught us for dealing with medical crises. Who has access to Brittany's car? Who could have put drugs in her trunk? Just her and me, Marcus said. We each have our own cars. I drive the Honda, she drives the Lexus. No one else has keys except us. Has the car been in for service recently? I asked. Has it been valeted anywhere? Has she lent it to anyone, even briefly? Marcus thought for a moment, and I could see him trying to focus, trying to push through the panic to think clearly. She took it to the dealer for an oil change last week, Monday, I think, and we valeted it when we went to that charity gala on Saturday night, the one at the Ritz. But Mom, would she think someone at the dealership or a valet guy put a kilo of cocaine in her trunk? Why would they do that? Maybe they were using her car as a temporary storage spot, I suggested, thinking out loud. Drug dealers do that sometimes, use random cars to move product around. Maybe they were planning to retrieve it later, but Brittany got pulled over before they could. Or, and this thought was darker, maybe someone's trying to set her up. Does Brittany have any enemies? Anyone who might want to hurt her or get her in trouble? Marcus shook his head slowly, but then he paused, and I saw something click behind his eyes. There is something. At work, Brittany's been having problems with a colleague. This woman, Veronica Chen, who was up for the same promotion Brittany got about 3 months ago. Veronica's been making things really difficult since then, spreading rumors about how Brittany only got the promotion because she's sleeping with the boss, which isn't true, trying to undermine Brittany's work, taking credit for her ideas, that kind of office politics bullshit. But Mom, would she go this far? Would she plant drugs in Brittany's car just because she lost out on a promotion? People do crazy things when they feel wronged, it said. Thinking about cases I'd seen in my years working in the ER, the violence people inflicted on each other over the smallest slights. Jealousy is a powerful motivator. But first, let's focus on the immediate problem. Brittany needs a lawyer, a good criminal defense attorney. Do you have one? Marcus looked embarrassed. We have a lawyer for contracts and real estate stuff, but not a criminal defense attorney. Mom, I don't even know where to start with this. I've never dealt with anything like this. I don't know any criminal lawyers. I don't know how bail works. I don't know what happens next. I feel completely lost. This was it. The moment I could have thrown his words back at him, could have said something cutting about how maybe he should have thought twice before pushing away the mother who'd always been there to help him navigate life's challenges. But looking at my son, seeing the fear and desperation in his eyes, I couldn't do it. Whatever hurt I felt, whatever resentment I carried, it all evaporated in the face of his need. I know someone who might be able to help, I said, pulling out my phone. There's a social worker at the hospital, Janet Rodriguez, who deals with a lot of criminal cases. She works with people coming out of the justice system, helps them transition back into society. She's always talking about the lawyers she works with, the good ones and the bad ones. Let me call her. It was late, nearly 11 p.m. now, but Janet answered on the third ring. Gloria, is everything okay? Janet, I'm sorry to call so late, but I need a favor. My daughter-in-law was just arrested on drug charges, serious charges, and we need a criminal defense attorney right away. The best one you know. Money isn't an issue. We just need someone who can help her. Janet didn't hesitate, didn't ask questions, just said she'd text me a number in 2 minutes. True to her word, within 120 seconds, my phone buzzed with a contact, Raymond Pierce, criminal defense attorney, with a note that said, "He's expensive, but he's the best. Tell him I sent you." I called Raymond Pierce, and he answered immediately, his voice alert despite the late hour. Lawyers like him, I guessed, were used to emergency calls at all hours. I explained the situation as concisely as I could. My daughter-in-law, Brittany Anderson, had been arrested about 2 hours ago. Possession with intent to distribute approximately 1 kilogram of cocaine found in her vehicle. She was claiming innocence, currently being processed at the 3rd precinct. I can be there in 30 minutes, Raymond said without hesitation. Don't let her say anything to anyone. Don't let your son make any statements either. I'll handle everything when I get there. While we waited for the lawyer, Marcus and I sat in uncomfortable silence, broken only by occasional updates from the desk sergeant. Brittany's processing was taking longer than usual because of the quantity of drugs involved, because they had to photograph the evidence, because they needed to run additional checks. Each minute felt like an hour. Marcus kept checking his phone, refreshing social media, and I finally asked him what he was doing. Checking to see if anyone's posted about this yet, he said miserably. If anyone saw her get arrested, Brittany's going to be mortified if this gets out. Her whole company will know. Her parents will know. Everyone we know will be talking about it. Marcus, I said gently, people are going to find out. Arrest records are public. If a reporter checks the police blotter tomorrow, this could even make the news. A suburban marketing executive arrested with a kilo of cocaine? That's a story. You need to prepare yourself and prepare Brittany for the fallout. He put his head in his hands, and I saw his shoulders shaking. My son was crying, really crying, and every maternal instinct I had wanted to comfort him, to tell him everything would be okay. But I couldn't promise that, because I didn't know if it would be okay. This was serious, potentially life-destroying serious. Raymond Pierce arrived exactly when he'd said he would, a tall black man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He wore an expensive suit despite the late hour and carried a leather briefcase that looked like it cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He shook my hand firmly, then Marcus's, then immediately took control of the situation in a way that inspired confidence. "I need to speak with the arresting officers," he said. "Review the arrest report, see the evidence they collected, and then I'll talk to Mrs. Anderson. Have they set a bail hearing yet?" The desk sergeant, who'd been watching us with thinly veiled curiosity, checked his computer. "Bail hearing scheduled for 9 a.m. tomorrow morning, Judge Patterson presiding." Raymond nodded, made some notes in a leather-bound planner. "Given the quantity involved and the charge, bail's going to be significant, probably in the range of $50,000 to $100,000. Are you prepared for that?" he asked Marcus directly. Marcus's face went pale. "I have some savings, but not that much liquid. Most of our money is tied up in the house, in retirement accounts. I'd have to sell investments, and that takes time, and there are penalties for early withdrawal." He looked at me, and I saw the question forming before he asked it. "Mom, I hate to ask, but do you have any money I could borrow? Just until I can liquidate some assets? I'll pay you back with interest, I promise." Here it was, yet another moment where I could have reminded him of his cruel words, of the boundaries he'd insisted on, of the 6 weeks he'd ignored me. I could have made him beg, could have made him really apologize, could have extracted promises about our future relationship as a condition of my help. But looking at my son, seeing his desperation, I couldn't do any of that, because that's not what love is. Love isn't conditional. Love isn't keeping score. Love is showing up when you're needed, even when you've been hurt, especially when you've been hurt. "I have some money saved," I said. "I've been putting away extra from my shifts, saving for retirement. I have about $30,000 I can access. If that's not enough, we'll figure something else out." The relief that flooded Marcus's face was immediate and overwhelming. "Mom, thank you. Thank you so much. I know I don't deserve your help after how I treated you. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but thank you. I'll pay you back every penny, I swear." "We'll worry about that later," I said. "Right now, let's just focus on getting Brittany home." Raymond Pierce disappeared into the back with the officers, and Marcus and I were left alone again in the waiting room. And in that moment, some dam broke in him, and he started talking, really talking, in a way he hadn't in months. "Mom, I'm so sorry. For everything. For the way I talked to you, for cutting you off, for choosing Brittany's comfort over your feelings. I was wrong. I was so wrong." I listened as Marcus explained what had happened over the past few months, how Brittany had been increasingly uncomfortable with my presence in their lives, how she'd felt like she was competing for his attention, how she'd grown up in a family where parents and adult children maintained significant distance, and she'd expected the same from us, how she'd given him an ultimatum. Either he established boundaries with me, or she didn't think their marriage could continue. And Marcus, terrified of losing his wife, had chosen to push me away. "She convinced me that you were too involved," Marcus said, tears streaming down his face. "She made it sound like our relationship was unhealthy, like you were controlling my life. She'd had therapy from some counselor who talked a lot about enmeshed families and codependency, and she applied all those concepts to us. And I listened to her because I wanted to be a good husband. I wanted to make my marriage work. But Mom, I missed you so much. Every single day. I wanted to call you. There were so many times when something would happen, and my first instinct was to tell you, and then I'd remember I wasn't supposed to. It was like cutting off a limb." "Why didn't you call?" I asked. "Why didn't you reach out if you were missing me so much?" "Pride," Marcus said, simply. "I'd made this big, dramatic speech about boundaries, and I thought if I called after just a few days or weeks, it would prove that Brittany was right, that I was too dependent on you. I thought I needed to stick it out, prove that I could be independent. And Brittany was watching too. Every time I seemed sad or distracted, she'd ask if I was thinking about calling you, and I'd have to deny it. It became this weird test of my commitment to our marriage. I felt anger rising up in me, anger at Brittany for manipulating my son, for making him choose between his wife and his mother, for creating this crisis that might not have happened if I'd still been part of their lives. But I pushed the anger down, because now wasn't the time. We're going to get through this, I said, all of us, together. And then we're going to have some serious conversations about what a healthy relationship looks like between an adult son and his mother and his wife. Because Marcus, what Brittany did wasn't okay. Making you choose between her and me wasn't okay. Healthy boundaries don't mean cutting people out completely. Raymond Pierce emerged about an hour later with Brittany. She was still in the orange jumpsuit they'd given her. Her designer clothes had been taken as evidence, along with her jewelry and her shoes. Her makeup was smeared from crying, her blonde hair was disheveled, and she looked utterly destroyed. When she saw Marcus, she started crying. Harder. When she saw me, she looked surprised, then embarrassed, then something else. Grateful, maybe. Gloria, she said in a voice hoarse from crying. You came. I didn't think. After everything. Thank you. Raymond explained the situation as we walked to his car. He'd offered to drive us all home rather than making us wait for an Uber. The bail hearing was set for 9 a.m. He'd be there to argue for reasonable bail given Brittany's clean record and standing in the community. Given the quantity of drugs, the judge would probably set bail at $50,000, which meant we'd need to pay 10%, $5,000, to a bail bondsman to secure her release. He'd already called a bondsman he worked with regularly, and they'd be ready to post bail as soon as the judge set the amount. But Mrs. Anderson, Raymond said, his voice serious, I need to tell you that this is a very serious charge. Possession with intent to distribute. In Illinois, with this quantity, you're looking at a Class X felony. If convicted, the sentence is 6 to 30 years in prison, with a possibility of up to 50 years and fines up to $500,000. This isn't a slap on the wrist. This is potentially life-destroying. Brittany started sobbing again, and Marcus pulled her close. I sat in the back seat next to them, and despite everything, despite all the hurt and resentment, I felt compassion for her. She looked so young and scared, so far from the confident woman who'd looked down her nose at me at family dinners, who'd convinced my son to push me away. Raymond, I said, you have to believe her. Brittany wouldn't do this. She didn't know about those drugs. Someone put them there. I believe you, Raymond said, glancing at us in the rearview mirror. Or at least, I believe it's possible. And that's what we're going to prove. But it's not going to be easy. The prosecution's case is straightforward. Drugs were found in your car, in your possession. The burden is on us to prove someone else put them there, which is difficult. We need to figure out who had access to your car, who had motive to frame you, and how they did it. And we need to do it fast. Back at Marcus and Brittany's house, Raymond sat up at their dining room table and began questioning Brittany in detail. I made coffee because that's what I do in a crisis. I make coffee and I try to be useful. And as I moved around their kitchen, a kitchen I hadn't been in for 6 weeks, I noticed things. The house looked different. Colder, somehow. There were no family photos anymore, the ones that had included me. There were dirty dishes in the sink, which was unusual for Brittany, who was normally fastidious about cleanliness. There was mail piled up on the counter, some of it looking like unpaid bills. The whole place had an air of neglect that hadn't been there before. Raymond's questioning was thorough and methodical. He asked Brittany to walk him through the past week, every place she'd been, everyone who'd had access to her car. The oil change at the dealership on Monday, the charity gala on Saturday where they'd used valet parking, the work event tonight where she'd parked in a public garage. He asked about her work situation, and that's when the story about Veronica came out in more detail. Brittany and Veronica Chen had both been up for a promotion to senior marketing director about 3 months ago. Both were qualified, both had been with the company for similar lengths of time. But Brittany had gotten the position, and Veronica had taken it badly. At first, it was just passive-aggressive comments, subtle undermining in meetings. But it had escalated. Veronica had started leaving notes on Brittany's desk, anonymous at first, but clearly from her, saying things like, "Enjoy it while it lasts," and "What goes up must come down." "Did you report these threats to HR?" Raymond asked. Brittany looked ashamed. "No, I thought it would make me look weak, like I couldn't handle office politics. I thought if I ignored her, she'd eventually give up and move on. I didn't want to seem paranoid or like I couldn't handle a little workplace drama. In hindsight, that was stupid. I should have documented everything." Raymond made notes, asked more questions. Had Veronica ever had access to Brittany's purse? Yes, several times. They'd had team lunches where purses were left at the table. Had Veronica ever made specific threats? Nothing direct, but there had been that comment at a happy hour 2 weeks ago, where Veronica had said, drunk and bitter, "You have no idea what's coming for you." Colleagues had laughed it off as the wine talking, but Brittany had felt unsettled by it. "I need you to think very carefully," Raymond said. "At that team lunch, when your purse was left at the table, were your car keys in it?" Brittany thought, then her eyes widened with realization. Yes, they were. "We went to Maggiano's downtown last week. Tuesday, I think. I left my purse at the table. When I went to the restroom, Veronica was still at the table when I left. I was probably gone 5 minutes. Oh my God, you think she copied my keys?" "It's a working theory," Raymond said. "If she had your keys copied, she could access your car anytime, anywhere. She could have planted the drugs, then made an anonymous tip to police about a suspicious vehicle or a driver who appeared impaired. It's elaborate, yes, but people have done far more for revenge." Over the next hour, Raymond outlined his investigation strategy. His firm would hire a private investigator to look into Veronica Chen, her background, her associates, her movements over the past week. They'd pull security footage from the restaurant where the team lunch happened, from Brittany's workplace parking garage, from anywhere Brittany's car had been. They'd interview other coworkers about Veronica's behavior and any threats she might have made. By the time Raymond left around 3 a.m., we had a plan. Marcus and I would go to the bail hearing in the morning, Raymond would argue for reasonable bail, we'd get Brittany out, and then the real work of building her defense would begin. I went home exhausted, physically and emotionally drained, but I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had happened, about how quickly life could change, about how Marcus had needed me after all. The bail hearing the next morning was surreal. I sat in the courtroom next to Marcus, watching as Brittany was brought in, wearing that orange jumpsuit, looking small and scared. Raymond argued passionately that Brittany was not a flight risk, had strong ties to the community, had no criminal record, and deserved reasonable bail. The prosecutor argued that the quantity of drugs indicated serious criminal intent and that bail should be set high to ensure she'd appear for trial. Judge Patterson, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, set bail at exactly $50,000. Marcus and I went immediately to the bail bondsman Raymond had recommended. I wrote a check for $5,000 from my savings account, and within 2 hours, Brittany was released. In the car on the way back to their house, Brittany sat in the back seat, quiet and withdrawn. Finally, she said, "Gloria, I owe you an apology, a big one. I know I encouraged Marcus to distance himself from you. I know I made him feel like your relationship was unhealthy. I was wrong. I was projecting my own family issues onto your situation. My parents are cold and distant. They've always been that way. And I thought that's how families were supposed to be. I thought your closeness with Marcus was weird, was clingy, was unhealthy. But seeing you drop everything to help us, seeing you pay our bail when you had every reason to tell us to handle it ourselves, I realize I was wrong about everything. I didn't say anything right away, just drove, processing her words. Finally, I said, Brittany, I appreciate the apology. And I'm not going to lie, you did hurt me. You convinced my son to push me away, and that was one of the most painful experiences of my life. But I also need to take some responsibility. I was too involved in Marcus's life. I did call too much, show up too often, give too much unsolicited advice. So maybe we both needed to learn some things. Maybe this whole terrible situation, as awful as it is, will help us figure out what a healthy relationship looks like for all of us. Over the next week, Raymond's investigation moved quickly. His private investigator, a sharp-eyed woman named Teresa Santos, uncovered some damning evidence. She found that Veronica Chen had a brother, Michael Chen, who had a criminal record. 2 drug convictions, possession and distribution. He'd served 3 years in prison and been released 18 months ago. Teresa's investigation revealed phone records showing frequent calls between Veronica and Michael in the week leading up to Brittany's arrest. Teresa also obtained security footage from Maggiano's restaurant on the day of the team lunch. The video clearly showed Veronica leaning over toward Brittany's purse while Brittany was away from the table, her hand moving into the bag for several seconds before quickly withdrawing. The footage was grainy but clear enough to see that something was taken from the purse. Teresa interviewed the valet company that had parked cars at the charity gala and found that the attendant who'd parked Brittany's car had quit unexpectedly the day after the gala without giving notice, and his phone number was now disconnected. But the breakthrough came when Teresa interviewed other employees at Brittany's company, guaranteed anonymity. One colleague, a junior marketing associate named Amanda Pierce, finally agreed to talk. She revealed that Veronica had been bragging at happy hours about having a plan to take Brittany down. She'd said things like, "She won't know what hit her," and "By the time I'm done, she'll wish she'd never taken my job." Amanda had thought. Veronica was just venting, just talking big after too many drinks. She never imagined Veronica would actually do something criminal. Armed with this evidence, Raymond went to the state's attorney's office and requested a meeting with the prosecutor handling Brittany's case. He presented everything: the motive, the opportunity, the timeline, the witness statements, the security footage, the phone records connecting Veronica to her brother who had access to drugs. He argued that Brittany had clearly been framed, that the real criminal was Veronica Chen, and that the state's attorney's office should be investigating her instead of prosecuting an innocent woman. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Lisa Martinez, was initially skeptical. "Mr. Pierce, your client was found in possession of a kilogram of cocaine. That's not circumstantial, that's direct evidence. You're asking me to believe in an elaborate frame-up scheme based on some security footage of a woman reaching into a purse and some hearsay about threats." But Raymond was persuasive. He pointed out that Brittany had no criminal history, no financial troubles that would suggest a need to deal drugs, no connections to the drug world. Meanwhile, Veronica had clear motive, means through her brother, and opportunity. He requested that they investigate Veronica before proceeding with Brittany's trial. To our surprise, Lisa Martinez agreed. "I'll open an investigation into Veronica Chen," she said. "But your client's charges stand until and unless we find definitive proof she was framed. If this investigation goes nowhere, we're proceeding to trial." It was the best we could hope for. Over the next 2 weeks, the state's attorney's office, working with Chicago PD, investigated Veronica. They pulled her phone records, which showed hundreds of calls to her brother Michael in the weeks leading up to Brittany's arrest. They executed a search warrant on Michael's apartment and found materials for packaging drugs, scales, and most damning, a key that fit Brittany's Lexus. They brought Veronica in for questioning, and she initially denied everything. But when confronted with the evidence, when told that her brother was also being questioned and would likely cut a deal to testify against her, she broke. She confessed everything: the jealousy over the promotion, the plan to destroy Brittany's career and life, copying Brittany's keys at the lunch, contacting her brother to get the cocaine, planting it in Brittany's trunk while the car was parked overnight at Brittany's workplace, making an anonymous call to police about a suspected drunk driver matching Brittany's car description in the area where she knew Brittany would be driving. Veronica was arrested and charged with possession of narcotics, conspiracy, planting evidence, and making false reports to police. Her brother Michael was charged as an accomplice. And most importantly for us, all charges against Brittany were dropped, completely dismissed. She was exonerated. But the experience had changed her, changed all of us in ways that would take months to fully understand. About a week after the charges were dropped, Marcus called and asked if he could come over to talk, just him, without Brittany. I said yes, and that evening, he sat at my kitchen table, the same table where he'd done his homework as a child, where I'd helped him study for tests, where we'd had so many important conversations over the years. And he apologized, really, truly apologized. Mom, I was wrong about everything. I let Brittany's insecurities color how I treated you. Her relationship with her parents is cold and transactional, and she assumed that's how all families were, that our closeness was abnormal. She'd read all these self-help books and articles about enmeshed families and codependency, and she convinced herself, and convinced me, that our relationship fit those patterns. But Mom, during these past few weeks, I've realized how wrong we were. Yes, maybe you called a bit too much, maybe you offered advice we didn't always need, but that came from love, not control. You were involved because you cared, not because you were trying to run my life. I listened as Marcus continued, letting him get it all out. When Brittany got arrested, the first person I thought to call was you. Not my friends, not her parents, you. Because I knew you'd drop everything and help, no matter what. And you did. You came immediately, you paid bail with your retirement money, you stayed up all night helping us figure things out. And Brittany's parents? They were disappointed and concerned about appearances. They didn't offer to help, didn't offer money, just lectured Brittany about being more careful about who she associates with. And I finally saw the difference between a family that really loves each other and a family that just goes through the motions. I appreciate you saying that, I said carefully. But Marcus, I do need to acknowledge that I wasn't perfect either. I was too involved. I did call too much. I did show up unannounced too often. I made you the center of my whole world, and that wasn't fair to you. You're an adult with your own life, your own marriage, and I need to respect that. So, moving forward, we need to find a balance, real boundaries, healthy ones that work for both of us. We spent hours that night talking, really talking, in a way we maybe never had before. We were honest about our feelings, about what we needed from each other, about what a healthy adult mother-son relationship should look like. We agreed on specific boundaries. I would call once a week, on Wednesdays, unless there was an emergency or special occasion. I would only visit when invited, but they would make a point to invite me at least twice a month. I would give advice only when asked, but they would actually ask when they genuinely needed my perspective. And most importantly, we would communicate openly and honestly about our feelings, instead of letting resentment build on either side. Brittany came over a few days later, without Marcus, and we had our own difficult conversation. She apologized for her role in creating the distance between Marcus and me, explained more about her own childhood. Her parents had sent her to boarding school at age 12, had missed most of her important life events because they were too busy with their business and social obligations. She'd learned that love was something you earned through achievement, not something freely given. She'd never experienced the kind of close, warm family relationship Marcus and I had, and it had made her uncomfortable because she didn't understand it. I thought, Brittany said, tears streaming down her face, that if Marcus was too close to you, it meant he wasn't fully committed to our marriage. I thought I had to compete with you for his attention and love. But I see now that love isn't a finite resource. Marcus can love both of us without taking anything away from either relationship. And Gloria, I see now what real family looks like. When I needed help, when my whole world was falling apart, you were there. Not because you had to be, not because I'd earned it, but because that's what family does. I'm so sorry. I promise I will never try to come between you and Marcus again. We hugged, really hugged, for the first time since she'd married my son. And I forgave her, because holding on to anger would have only hurt me, would have poisoned whatever relationship we might be able to build. We're going to start over, I told her. All of us. We're going to build something better, something healthier, something that works for everyone. And Brittany, I want you to know, I'm not your enemy. I never was. I'm just a mother who loves her son. And now I want to try to build a relationship with you too, separate from Marcus. Because you're part of this family now, and family supports each other. It's been 2 years since all of that happened. Veronica Chen is in prison, serving a 7-year sentence for her crimes. Her brother, Michael, cut a deal to testify against her and got 5 years. Brittany had to change jobs after the arrest became public knowledge, but she found a better position at a company with a healthier culture. And our family has found a new equilibrium, a better balance than we had before. We have Sunday dinner once a month, alternating between my house and theirs. I call on Wednesdays like clockwork, and we talk for about 30 minutes about our weeks. They call me when they have news or need advice, which happens more often than I expected. I visit when invited, and I'm invited regularly. Last month, Brittany called me in tears because she'd had a fight with her mother, and we talked for over an hour, and she told me she wished her mother was more like me. That conversation meant more to me than she probably knows. And then, 3 weeks ago, I got a call that changed everything again. But this time, it was good news. Brittany asked if she could come over to talk, and when she arrived, she was glowing. "Gloria," she said, "I'm pregnant. We're having a baby. You're going to be a grandmother." And I cried, but this time they were happy tears, joyful tears. "There's something else," Brittany said. "I wanted to ask you something. I didn't have a good mother, not really. My mom was physically present but emotionally absent. She never taught me how to be a mother, never showed me what unconditional love looks like. But you did. Watching you with Marcus, watching how you showed up for us even after we hurt you, watching how you love without conditions or expectations, that's taught me so much. So I'm asking, would you help me learn to be a mother? Would you teach me what you know? Would you be involved with this baby in the way you wanted to be involved with Marcus all along?" I looked at my daughter-in-law, this woman who'd once seen me as a threat and now saw me as a role model, and I felt my heart swell. "Brittany, I would be honored, but I want you to know, you're going to be a wonderful mother. You already are. The fact that you're thinking about this, that you're asking for help, that shows me you're going to be great. And yes, I'll be there. I'll teach you everything I know. But I'll also respect your boundaries. Respect that this is your baby. Respect that you and Marcus are the parents, and I'm the grandmother. We'll figure it out together." Now I'm sitting here, 2 months before my first grandchild is born, a little girl they're naming Hope, and I'm thinking about everything that happened to get us here. Marcus told me he didn't need me anymore, and for 6 weeks, I believed him. I thought my role as his mother was over, that I'd been demoted to a distant relative who needed permission to call. But then Brittany made a terrible mistake, or rather had a terrible thing done to her, and suddenly everything changed. My friend Denise says I'm a saint for helping them after they'd hurt me so badly. But I don't think that's true. I think I'm just a mother, doing what mothers do. We show up. We show up when our children need us, even when they've said they don't. We show up when they're hurt, even when they're the ones who did the hurting. We show up because that's what love is. Not a feeling that comes and goes based on how we're treated, but a choice we make every day to be there, to care, to help, to forgive, to try again. That doesn't mean there aren't boundaries now. There are, and they're important. Healthy relationships need boundaries, need space for everyone to be individuals, need respect for autonomy and choices. And I've learned that I can be a good mother without being an all-consuming mother. I can care deeply without trying to control everything. I can offer support without demanding to be needed. I can love without keeping score. But I've also learned that when someone you love is in crisis, all the boundaries in the world don't matter as much as showing up. All the hurt feelings and pride and I told you so's don't matter when someone genuinely needs help. And that's the lesson I hope I've taught Marcus through all of this. Not through words, but through actions. I hope I've shown him what unconditional love looks like, what forgiveness looks like, what family means when it's real, healthy, and built on mutual respect. Last Sunday, Marcus and Brittany came over for dinner. As I was clearing the table, Marcus came into the kitchen to help, and he put his arm around my shoulders in that casual way he used to when he was younger, before Brittany, before the distance. "Thanks, Mom," he said, "for everything, for always being there, even when I told you not to be, for loving me even when I didn't deserve it, for showing me what real love looks like. I don't know what we would have done without you." "You would have figured it out," I said, meaning it. "You're strong and capable and smart. But I'm glad I could help. That's what mothers are for." "No," he said, seriously. "That's what family is for. Real family. And I'm sorry it took almost losing everything for me to remember that. I'm sorry I ever made you feel like you weren't wanted or needed. You are. You always will be." We stood there in my kitchen, just being mother and son, and I looked at him, really looked at him. He's not my little boy anymore, hasn't been for a long time. He's a man, with gray starting to show at his temples, with worry lines around his eyes, with responsibilities and challenges I can't fix for him. But he's still my son, and he always will be. And that means I'll always be there when he needs me, whether he thinks he needs me or not, whether he asks or not, whether it's convenient or not, because that's what mothers do. My son said he didn't need me anymore, told me I was too involved, set boundaries that felt like walls. But when his wife made a mistake, when circumstances beyond their control threatened everything they'd built, those walls came down fast. And I was there, not because I wanted to prove a point, not because I wanted to say I told you so, but because that's what love does. It shows up. It helps. It forgives. It doesn't keep score. It doesn't hold grudges. It just keeps loving, keeps showing up, keeps being there. My name is Gloria. I'm 56 years old, and I'm a mother. That's my most important identity. More important than being a nurse, more important than being a friend, more important than anything else in my life. And being a mother means showing up, even when it's hard, even when you're hurt, even when your child has told you they don't need you. Because the truth is, we all need our mothers sometimes. We just don't always realize it until crisis hits, until life gets hard, until we're scared and lost and don't know what to do. And when that moment comes, when your child reaches out in fear and desperation and need, you don't hesitate. You don't remind them of how they hurt you. You don't make them beg or apologize first. You just show up, and you help, and you love them through whatever they're facing. That's what mothers do. That's what I did. And I do it again 1,000 times over because he's my son. And that will never change, no matter what boundaries are set, or what distance is created, or what hurtful words are said. At the end of the day, he's mine, and I'm his, and nothing can really break that bond. It can be stretched, tested, strained almost to breaking, but it's still there. And when it matters most, when the crisis comes, that bond is what holds, what matters, what saves us all.